to help cover our running costs and future projects by visiting www.muslimcentral.com/donate.
وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. So the topic I have today is sins of the tongue. And really what I wanted to speak about today is not so much the particular sins of the tongue, but the issue of the weight of our words and how the words that we speak in our Sharia actually our Sharia holds it to a high standard. So this is why you'll find that our Sharia goes through great lengths to watch a person's tongue. And this is why you'll find that in the Sharia, something like the honor of a Muslim is something which is very sacred. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, in his farewell khutbah, now you have to imagine that this is the last khutbah, one of the last pilgrimages that the Prophet ﷺ performed, and this is obviously an important message that he's about to give to the Ummah. And this was one of the biggest gatherings of Muslims around the Prophet ﷺ before the Prophet ﷺ's death. And so you have to imagine that this is something very important that the Prophet ﷺ is about to tell the people. So that's why you'll find in this farewell khutbah, in the farewell pilgrimage, you'll find that the message is quite general. And a lot of the message has to do with the rights of your brothers and your sisters. And one of the first things that the Prophet ﷺ says is, إِنَّ دِمَاءَكُمْ وَأَمْوَالَكُمْ وَأَعْرَاضَكُمْ حَرَامٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. He said that your honor and your wealth, your property, and the blood, meaning the life of you, meaning all of you, is haram upon you. Meaning it is haram for you to transgress upon these things of your fellow brothers and sisters. And this is something which Prophet told us is something which is very sacred. So you'll see that the Sharia goes through great lengths to protect the honor of a Muslim. What is said about a Muslim, how a person is treated in a community or a society, the Sharia doesn't take this lightly. And this is why you'll find that it's not okay in Islam to simply just say whatever you want about whoever you want. Rather, we are held accountable for the words that come out of our mouth. And this is why Allah Jalla wa Ala, when speaking about the issue of backbiting, Allah Azza wa Jalla likened it to eating the dead flesh of another human being. And the reason why this imagery is so vivid is because of the severity of the issue. So Allah Azza wa Jalla says, أَيُحِبُّ أَحْدُكُمْ أَنْ يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا. Right? Would any of you like to eat the dead flesh of your brother? فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ. You would certainly hate this. So Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying, just like you would hate to eat the dead flesh of another human being, and I don't think there's a single person amongst us who would be okay with eating the dead flesh, let alone a human being, even of an animal. Like we wouldn't even eat the meta of an animal. But now imagine a brother or a sister, we would never eat their dead flesh. So Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying, just as you would hate to do that action, similarly you should hate backbiting. Speaking about someone behind their back. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about was why did the sins of the tongue occur in the first place? So why do people tend to fall into sins of the tongue? And one of the first reasons is that many people don't understand what the sins of the tongue actually are. So you'll hear people say things like backbiting and slander and stuff like that, but they don't quite understand what that means. So if you hear someone backbiting, for example, and you tell them, listen, brother or sister, you're backbiting. They'll say, no, I'm not backbiting, I'm just saying what I heard. Or they'll say, I'm not saying something which isn't true, this actually happened. Or I saw this person do this. And they'll say, I'm not really backbiting. So it's incumbent upon us to go back to the definition of the Prophet ﷺ and see how he defined backbiting. So he said ﷺ to the companions, أَتَدْرُونَ مَنْ غِيبَ. He said, do you know what ghiba is? Backbiting. He said, do you know what backbiting is? He's asking the companions, radiallahu anhu. And they said, Allah and His Messenger know best. And the Prophet said, ذِكْرُكَ أَخَاكَ بِمَا يَكْرَهُ. He said, it is to say about your brother something that they would dislike. That's it. Nothing more. And they asked him, they said, Ya Rasulullah, what if what we are saying is true? Yeah, he may dislike for us to say this, but what if we're saying which is true? And the Prophet said that if you are saying something which is true, then you have backbit them. And if you say something which is false about them, then you have slandered them. That's another sin. So the issue isn't, I'm just saying something which is true. The issue is, would this person like for you to say this about them or not? That is the litmus test of backbiting. So anytime someone says something, and this is mostly for us as an individual, if we say something about someone, the only question we should ask ourselves is, would this person like for us to say this or not? If the answer is no, then we have fallen into backbiting. And that's a serious issue because, a lot of times we tend to look at these outward sins and think they're very severe, and they are severe, major sins like zina or drinking and stuff like that. But we forget that the sins of the tongue are also major sins. So the sin of backbiting someone is a major sin. It is on the level of something like committing zina. Right? And we tend to belittle these sins. And we don't understand the sins, we don't understand the severity of the sins of the tongue, and this is why it's easy for us to fall into sins of the tongue. But imagine now that when one of us is speaking, we have it in our mind that, I could be committing a major sin, simply by saying something about someone that they wouldn't like for us to say about them. And I have to ask you, do you think you would speak a lot less? I certainly would. Right? If we were to keep that in our mind, then listen, if I say something, and this person doesn't like what I'm saying, then this could very easily put me into a major sin. And a lot of times it's not even words. And this is, subhanAllah, how much weight the Sharia gives to, speaking about others. There was a time when Aisha, radiallahu ta'ala anha, as you know, she loved the Prophet ﷺ very, very much. Very, very much. To the point where she would, at times, because of her intense love for the Prophet ﷺ, she would get jealous of the other wives. So once she said to the Prophet ﷺ, she said, Ya Rasulullah, hasbuka min Safiya, and then she stopped. She said, it is enough for you that Safiya is, and then she just pointed with her hand like this. And what she was saying was, and Safiya obviously was the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, what she was saying was that it is enough for you that Safiya is, and she just pointed like this, indicating that Safiya is short. Right? And this is out of her jealousy. He's saying, look, Safiya is short, I'm taller than Safiya, then you should love me more. And this is something, obviously Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha was very young at that time. And you have to realize that when things like this happen, this is not something actually which goes against the companions or Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. This is actually a praise for Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, because realize that she was receiving tarbiyah from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So the Prophet sallallahu says to her, he says, Ya Aisha, إنك قلت كلمة لو مزجت بماء البحر لمزجت. He said that you have said a word, a kalima, a single kalima, a word, that if it was mixed in the water of the ocean, it would pollute that ocean. Right? And this is how severe the Prophet is telling her, that this is very severe what you have done, what you have said. And notice that the Prophet said kalima, a word. But did she actually say a word? No, she actually just did a ishara. She just pointed. She indicated something. But the Prophet ﷺ even considered that part of this same issue. So sometimes we can do something as insignificant as rolling our eyes. Or saying, pointing like that and saying, basically we're indicating like, can you believe this person? Right? Or go behind someone and, make a face or something like that. And obviously if this person saw us doing this, they wouldn't appreciate that. They wouldn't like it. They would actually get hurt by it. And this action here can also fall into backbiting. Just because we haven't actually spoken it, doesn't mean it can't fall into backbiting. So that is the issue. The issue, one of the first issues is not actually understanding what backbiting and what these sins of the tongue actually are. And this is why a lot of people tend to fall into backbiting. There's a famous scholar by the name of Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah ta'ala. He was a very spiritual person, and he was known to be one of the most pious people in his time, rahimahullah ta'ala. He said that if a person speaks about somebody else in a negative way, so he said if a person says anything negative about someone else, they're going to fall into one of three categories. He said either they're going to mention something about someone which is true, right? But it's something that they dislike, obviously, something negative. He said this is ghiba, this is backbiting. Or he said that they're going to mention something about someone which isn't true. He said this is what? Slander, right? This is buhtan. He said, or they're going to say something about someone which they don't know if it's true or untrue. So basically they heard something and they just passed it on. Right? They don't know if it's true or not, but they heard it and they passed it on. And he said this is ifk. This is rumor mongering. And all three of these issues, all three of these things are major sins. Sins of the tongue. So in essence, if we say something about someone in a negative way, something that they wouldn't like for us to say, there's a very high chance that we fall into a major sin. And this is what Imam Saad Tasleem is trying to make us aware of. The second reason why people tend to fall into sins of the tongue is the human desire for revenge. The Prophet ﷺ, he once asked the companions, he said, أَتَدْرُونَ مَنَ الْمُفْلِسِ? He said, do you know who is considered bankrupt? And obviously the companion said, Ya Rasulullah, it's obviously someone who doesn't have any wealth or any property. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the muflis, the true bankrupt person, is the one who comes on the Day of Judgment with their fasting and their qiyam and their praying and their good deeds and their charity, etc., etc., etc. But what happens? At the same time, they had slandered this person. They had backbit that person. They had harmed this person. And for this reason, the Prophet tells us that all these good deeds that they have done are now taken away from them and given to the people that they had harmed, or they had backbitten, or they had slandered, or they had talked about, or they had gossiped about. And when their good deeds finish, the bad deeds of that person who they had wronged are now placed on top of this person. The Prophet said, this is truly a bankrupt person. The one who did so much in their life. They came to the masjid every day, for example. In Ramadan, mashallah, they came to Taraweeh. They prayed qiyam. They went to fundraisers and gave charity. And they did so much in their life, but they didn't save anyone from their tongue. Right? No one was safe from their tongue. It would be very easy for them to talk about other people. Right? The honor of a Muslim was not sacred with them. And this is why this person is truly bankrupt on the Day of Judgment. Right? The person had so much, but it was all taken away from them. Now, why do I mention this under the category of revenge? I mention this under the category of revenge because a lot of times people think that if they have been backbitten or they have been talked about, that the best way to counter this is to say something bad about the other person. So if somebody says something about you, obviously we're going to get upset, we're going to get mad. So our natural desire is to say, you know what, let me tell you something about them. Right? If we heard somebody talking about us, we'll say, you know what, who is this person to speak about me? Let me tell you about them. Let me tell you about their family. Let me tell you about what they did in the past. And there's so much irony in that action. Because when we turn around and backbite somebody else, or speak bad about them, who are we really harming? Who are we really harming? According to that hadith I just told you, we're harming ourselves. Right? So instead of getting any type of revenge, we're only harming ourselves. And this is why the same scholar, Imam Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his time, a man came to him and he said to him that so-and-so has been talking bad about you. They have been gossiping about you, or they have been saying so many things about you. And first of all, Imam Hasan al-Basri got very upset. He got very upset. He said, hasn't Shaitan found a messenger other than you? Meaning, why are you doing this work of bringing news from here and there? He said, get out of here, get out of my house. He sent him away. Then the Imam, rahimahullah ta'ala, he goes to this person's house, the one who had been backbiting and slandering the Imam, rahimahullah ta'ala, with a plate of dates. He knocks on the door, and this man opens the door, and obviously he's very surprised to see the Imam. Very surprised. Because he had been talking bad about the Imam. Right? And a person, if you've been talking bad about someone, the last thing you want to see is them showing up at your front door. Right? You'll get scared. But he gets surprised because he sees the Imam with a plate of dates. And the Imam says to him, he says, I have been heard that you have been talking about me. So I wanted to repay you. And so I have brought you this plate of dates. He said, I only regret that I cannot repay you with that which you have paid me. What is he speaking about here? He's speaking about the good deeds. In essence, the Imam is saying, Jazakallah khair for giving me your good deeds. Right? Jazakallah khair for giving me your good deeds. And this is why one of the earlier scholars, he said, if there's anyone deserving of me backbiting them, it's my parents. Because they're most deserving of my deeds. Right? If we were to backbite anyone. Because in essence, we're really harming ourselves. When we speak about someone, we're giving up our good deeds. And we're taking their bad deeds. May Allah Azza wa Jal protect us. The third reason is peer pressure. Sometimes we fall into sins of the tongue because of peer pressure. Now, I know a lot of people, they hear the words peer pressure and they tend to think of like young children or people in high school or middle school and stuff like that. But I tell you that adults very much fall into peer pressure. How does this happen? This happens at that gathering where a couple of brothers have gathered together or a couple of sisters have gathered together. And by the way, people tend to think that women are more likely to gossip and talk. There may be some truth to that, but it doesn't mean that the brothers are not free from that, right? You'll find a lot of gatherings where brothers get together and they do the exact same thing, right? And sometimes sisters are actually better off than brothers. Well, they'll have more restraint by talking about others and the brothers won't. And that's really an unfortunate situation that we're in. But you'll see like an average gathering, and in this gathering, somebody comes up. So somebody's name is brought up. And somebody says, this person did this to me and they did that to me, or, this person is like this and like that. And then somebody else says, what, they did this to me too, or, this person is bad and I've seen them do this or that. And there's another person in the gathering, and they don't really know this person, and they've never really interacted with this person. But they feel left out of this conversation. Right? They want to be part of this session of talking about this person. So they'll join in and say, you know what, I think you're right. You know what, I think I might have, seen him do this or seen her do this also. And this is peer pressure, where we're sitting in a gathering, and just because we want to feel part of the conversation, we want to take part in what's going on, we'll allow this backbiting to happen, and we may even contribute to this backbiting. Now, for us as Muslims, if we're sitting in a gathering and someone is being talked about, either backbitten or slandered, or rumors, we as Muslims, we have one of three options. And when I say one of three options, I mean we only have these three options. Nothing besides this. Number one, and this is our first, and inshallah, our best option, is that we actually defend the person who is being backbitten or slandered. So we say, listen, what you're saying about this person is wrong, and you're backbiting, so I urge you to stop. This person is not like this, and they do not deserve that you speak about them like this. This is the first and best thing we can do when we're sitting in a gathering where someone is being spoken about. The second thing that we can do, and this is the lesser degree, is that we simply make inkar upon this situation, upon the actual sin. So we say, listen, I don't know if what you're saying is true or not, but this action that's happening here of us talking about somebody else, this can either be backbiting or slander. So I urge you to stop. Meaning you're not defending the person. You're not defending your brother or your sister, which is, they're right upon you that you actually do defend them. But you don't do that. But at the very least, you say, listen, this what is happening here is backbiting or slander. And this is a major sin, my brothers and sisters, so I think we should stop. The third and final option we have, and this is the least that we can do as a Muslim, as a mu'min, as a believer, is that we get up and we leave. That we don't sit in a gathering where backbiting is being taken place. This is the very, very least that we can do as a believer. Meaning it's not okay for us to just sit on the sidelines and be like, I'm not taking part in it, I'm not doing anything. It is not allowed for us to sit in a gathering in which somebody is being backbitten or slandered, or in which rumors are being passed around. And this is a misconception a lot of people have, where they feel that if they're sitting in a gathering and they're not taking part in the backbiting or the slander, that they're somehow okay, or they're somehow better than the other people. Right? Realize that you're just as sinful. You could be even more sinful because you're not making inkar, you're not stopping this sin. So the very least that we can do as a believer is to get up and leave. As Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ. That, speaking about the believers, that it is those who turn away from ill speech. Meaning they don't sit there and listen. They get up and they leave. They go away. Right? They excuse themselves from the situation. And as we know that in Islam, it's not just the actual act of sinning. Sometimes simply being part of a sin with our ears or with our eyes can make us fall into that sin. As Allah Azza wa Jalla says, إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. That your sam'a, your hearing, and your sight, right, and your heart, about all of these things you'll be questioned. Meaning you'll be questioned about the things that you exposed yourself to. So if you're sitting in a gathering where something haram is happening, and you have the ability to get up and leave, you'll be questioned about that. Why did you expose your ears or your eyes or your heart to this? You know, and this is, I think, a very big issue for us, especially living in the West, where a lot of times we'll take the passive approach to sins. We'll say, you know, I'm not really doing it myself, what's the big deal? And we forget that our heart gets impacted. That when we're sitting in a gathering, or we're sitting in an area where sins are being taken place, it has an effect on our heart. And this is why, you know, the issue of shisha often comes up, or hookah, or mu'assar, as some people call it. You know, in Saudi Arabia, they call it mu'assar. And one of the things that's associated with shisha and hookah and stuff like that is not so much the sin itself. You know, even though I do not see any difference in opinion amongst the scholars that it is haram to smoke shisha, right? But some people are under the misconception that, you know, it's not as bad as cigarettes, so therefore it's somehow okay. But let's put that aside. Even apart from the actual act of smoking shisha, what happens in these gatherings where people are smoking shisha? Is it usually a pious gathering? Are people remembering Allah Azza wa Jalla? Is Quran being recited? Is anything positive happening at this? Usually it's a bunch of guys sitting around smoking shisha, maybe drinking tea, maybe talking about others, maybe watching sports, and now it's become way worse than that. When we have shisha bars and hookah bars and stuff like that, where guys and girls get together, people hang out, and you know, it's not a good environment, right? But a believer doesn't expose themselves to that. They won't sit in a gathering like that. So you may not have an issue with the actual shisha, which you should, but you should have an issue with what's surrounding you, what's going on in this environment. And as a believer, you shouldn't sit in that environment. You shouldn't be part of that environment. Meaning you, as a mu'min, as a believer, you should hold yourself to higher standards than others. Right? Because it's not about the others. And really, it's not about you telling people that, listen, I'm more pious than you, or I'm better than you because I will not attend this gathering. It's not about that. It's about you caring about your heart and saying, listen, I won't expose my heart to this because my heart is very precious to me. I understand that all the matters in my life revolve around my heart. As the Prophet ﷺ said, that in your body is a morsel of flesh. Right? إِذَا صَلَحَتْ صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ. If it is sound, the whole body will be sound. وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ. That if it is unsound, if it is messed up in some way, if your heart gets messed up, if it gets corrupted, then your whole body will be corrupted, meaning all your actions will be corrupted. It's a matter of the heart, what you expose your heart to. So if you're exposing your heart to people gossiping and talking and slandering and stuff like that, rest assured it's going to have an impact on your heart. And sooner or later, it may lead you to very much fall into that sin itself. And this is why we look at the issue of people cursing. The more you expose yourself to people who curse a lot, the more desensitized you get to it, and the less of an issue it'll be for you. The more used to it you get, the less you'll cringe every time you hear a curse word. And for those of you who don't know, I spent the last 7 years of my life in Saudi Arabia, in the University of Medina, and alhamdulillah, it was all students of knowledge in the university. All students were coming there to learn their deen. And I never heard a curse, not a single curse word in my 7 years. I didn't hear a single curse word while I was in the university. But I remember as soon as I would come to the US, come back to visit my family, and that first curse word I would hear, it would make my heart shake. Because I'm just not used to hearing it. And I tell you, and this is a very sad thing for me to share with you, but now I've been back for a while, and every so often I do hear curse words. Right? Because that's just the society we live in. And I'm not just speaking about non-Muslims, I'm speaking about Muslims as well. And it doesn't have that same impact that it has on me, that it had when I was in the university. because I wasn't exposed to it at all back then. Right? So it really shook me when I heard somebody say a curse word. Now, obviously, it bothers me, but I'm really afraid that it doesn't bother me like it used to bother me. And I know the reason is because I'm more exposed to it now. And that is the same issue when it comes to backbiting and sins of the tongue. Where the more we expose ourselves to it, the more we'll begin to think that it's okay. It's okay to talk about a sister. It's okay to talk about a brother. It's okay to say, I heard this sister did so-and-so, did such and such. Or this brother did something, this brother did this or that. Right? And a lot of times in our communities, in our families, this is a very sad thing to say, it's become common practice. Right? It's not a big deal. So a couple aunties will be sitting and you're talking about someone and nobody cares. It's just like part of the conversation. Or a couple uncles are sitting or even like the young generation. They're not immune to this either. They're sitting and they're talking about somebody and it's not a big deal. It's not a big issue. Because they've become so desensitized to it that it's not a big deal. And one of the sad things, subhanAllah, is that, one of my teachers would say that if you have a friend or friends who backbite somebody else or gossip about somebody else, rest assured that as soon as you leave, they will be talking about you. That if others aren't safe from their tongue, who are you to think that you will be safe from their tongue? Right? Just because they're your friend? No. If somebody's in the habit of backbiting and in the habit of talking about others, they will surely talk about you too. Right? The other reason is the issue of jest and play. So sometimes people fall into the sins of the tongue out of jest and play. So for some reason people think that if you've said something about somebody else in a joking manner, that for some reason it's okay. And for some reason it's not a big deal. Right? That as long as you put some humor into it, it's not that big of a deal. And that's actually very sad. Because when we say something bad about somebody else or something negative about somebody else in a joking way, we're actually bringing two sins upon ourselves. Number one is the sin of actually talking about somebody else. The sin of actually backbiting or slander. Number two is the sin of making fun of somebody else. So we're bringing two sins upon ourselves. Right? And the issue with laughing and joking and stuff like that, alhamdulillah, Islam doesn't tell us we can't laugh and joke. Right? But Islam tells us we cannot laugh and joke at the expense of others. That's one of the things we can't do. Right? And one of the reasons is because it very easily we fall into sins of the tongue. And you'll notice that a person who's known to be like a joker and stuff like that, known to laugh a lot, right? Usually their boundaries of what is okay to say and what's not okay to say gets blurred. Right? That if a person jokes a lot, at some point, they will cross certain boundaries because they feel it's okay to do it out of joke. And this is why if you've ever seen like stand-up comedians, and I don't, I'm not suggesting you go out and watch stand-up comedians, but you'll see they'll say the most filthiest things, them things that society will never accept, but because they're doing stand-up comedy, somehow it's okay. Right? You can be racist, it's not a problem. You can talk about women in a degrading manner, it's not a problem. Right? You can curse out whoever you want, you can use the filthiest examples and nobody cares. Why? Why are people okay with it? Because it's done in a laughing and joking manner. Right? But in Islam, it doesn't make a difference. And like I said, it could be worse. If we're backbiting and slandering somebody else, it could be worse. And we're falling into two sins. The other issue is the issue of suspicion and seeking the faults of others, going out of our way to look for the faults of others. And this is, subhanAllah, I would say a very, very serious problem. And I would say it's like the evil brother, or like the partner in crime of sins of the tongue. And that's looking for the shortcomings of others. Going out of our way to see the faults of others. The Prophet said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالظَّنِّ فَإِنَّ الظَّنَّ أَكْذَبَ الْحَدِيثِ. He said, beware of suspicion, because suspicion is the worst of false speech. Right? So when we start suspecting others, right? And this is when we don't know. We're not really sure if somebody did something wrong or not, but we start to assume that they did something wrong. An example of this is, let me give you like a really vivid example. You see somebody walking out of a liquor store, right? You see a brother walking out of a liquor store, you say, I know for a fact, for example, you'll say, I know for a fact he went in there to buy liquor, buy alcohol. And then, what happens? You go tell somebody else, right? Oh, I saw this brother walking out of the liquor store. This brother has a beer, and he comes to the masjid, what's going on? Right? And this is how the rumors get started and stuff like that. This is a dhan, because we're not sure. Do we know for a fact that he went in there to buy liquor? Maybe this brother went in there to make inkar upon what's happening. Maybe he went in there to get somebody else out of there. Maybe he went in there for a different reason. Maybe he went in there to buy a pack of gum. Do you know this? But when we begin to suspect and have suspicions, this is a slippery slope that leads us into sins of the tongue. And going out of our way to find the shortcomings of others. And I think this is one of the issues that has really plagued our community, where we have to find the faults of someone. And a lot of times, it may even be like an imam. So for example, somebody in the community doesn't like an imam. Now, to put that imam down, they'll try to look for faults in this person, or a public figure, right? Or even somebody that we don't like. So you have an issue with a sister, for example, or a brother has an issue with another brother, they'll go out of their way to look for their faults. And the Prophet said, subhanAllah, this is one of the more scary hadith that I've come across in my life. And it's very scary because this is something which is very common, like I said. But the punishment for that is very severe. The Prophet said, "Man tatabba'a awrata akhihi Muslim." That the one who follows or goes and seeks for the faults of their brother Muslim, right? تَتَبَّعَ اللَّهُ عَوْرَتَهُ. That Allah will seek the faults of this person. And then the Prophet said, وَمَنْ تَتَبَّعَ اللَّهُ عَوْرَتَهُ يَفْضَحُ. And whoever's faults are sought by Allah, that Allah will destroy them and cause them to be in ruin. وَلَوْ كَانَ فِي جَوْفِ بَيْتِهِ. Even if he's hiding in the depths of his house. Right? So when we go out of our way to seek the faults of others, the Prophet tells us that in this case, Allah will seek our faults and expose us. Right? And there's nothing that we can hide from Allah Azza wa Jalla. Right? None of us are perfect. None of us are angels. We all make mistakes. As the Prophet said, كُلُّ بَنِي آدَمَ خَطَّاءٌ. All of the son of Adam, all mankind makes mistakes, that we sin. Right? But the issue is, Allah is aware of our sins. And the last thing that we want is that Allah exposes our sins, because Allah knows exactly everything that we do. We can't hide it from Allah. So when we go out of our way to seek the faults of others, Allah will expose us. And with Allah, we have seen this. We have seen these people who make it a habit to go out and seek the faults of others. Right? Allah will expose them at some point in their life. Allah will expose their faults in one way or the other. And when Allah exposes your faults, it's not going to be a small deal. Allah will ruin you. Right? And this is why I say this hadith is so scary. The Prophet is warning us that, listen, mind your own business. Right? Look out for yourself. Right? Be careful when talking about somebody else. Be careful when going out of your way to seek the fault of your fellow brother or your fellow sister. Now, I didn't want to just leave you like that. I wanted to share with you a couple things that we can do to make sure that we are conscious of the sins of the tongue. Number one, firstly, is to understand why, like I said, with the things that I mentioned, why we fall into the sins of the tongue. So if we understand that, these are major sins. You know what? It's as simple as me saying something negative about somebody else, something that they wouldn't like for us to say. And really, like I said, if we were to apply that in our life, we'd stop saying a lot of things. Secondly, understanding how severe of an issue it is. Right? And understanding that the words that come out of our mouth have a lot of weight. And understanding also that we're going to be held accountable for each and every word. We can deceive ourselves at times to think that, I said it and it's gone and maybe one or two people heard it and it's done. But we forget that Allah Azza wa Jalla has angels recording the words that we say. Right? That every time we say something, there's an angel writing it down. Why do the angels write these words down? That a person doesn't say a single word except that there's an angel writing it down. Right? Why? It's so we will be held accountable. So we have to answer for these things. And when we say something, we will be held accountable. So when we show up on the day of judgment, we will be questioned. Why did you say this about this person? Right? Or this thing that you said, this is backbiting. And we'll be held accountable for that. So that's when we think about that and we consider that, when we ponder that, that'll help us stay away from sins of the tongue. Also, learning to mind your own business, right? And like I said, one of the issues of finding the faults of others, we have to train ourselves to mind your own business. Right? And this is something I know this is, in this current day where we have like Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, everything seems to be like public news. Right? But we really have to work hard to train ourselves to be like, you know what? And number one, I need to have like a private life and a public life. Right? So it's not a cool thing to just post everything on Facebook and Twitter and just tell everything what's going on. But that's us. But even for others, right, we have to learn to mind our own business. Right? Train ourselves to take care of ourselves first and foremost. Like I said in the beginning of this talk, it's an issue of the heart. It's a matter of the heart that we really have to take care of our heart. And we have to look out for ourselves. There's a famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And this hadith is very often quoted. And if you'll see, like, people often post it on Facebook. Or people will tweet this hadith. Or people will often talk about it. So you hear this hadith in many khutbahs. And this is one of the hadith that I say that is very easy to talk about. It's a beautiful hadith. You hear it, everyone's like, MashaAllah, that's so amazing. But it's very hard to implement. Almost nobody implements this. The Prophet said, "Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir." That the one who believes in Allah and the last day, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. That they should say that which is good or stay silent. Right? You've heard this hadith before. But now I want you to take this hadith and apply it to every single thing that comes out of your mouth. And that's a task which is difficult. And that's a task that we need to work toward. And really, if we were to apply this to the things that we say, a lot of what we say would cut down. Maybe in half, maybe the majority of what we say would cut down. If every time we were about to say something, we said, listen, is this good or not? Right? If it's not, maybe I should stay silent, as the Prophet said. Right? So I often tell people, like, it's not even a bad idea to take this hadith and like write it in your room on your wall to remind yourself, right? Or put it as like the background of your phone, where like you can see it all the time, and you see the words of the Prophet reminding you that, listen, be careful what you say. If it's not good, then just stay silent. Inshallah, I'm going to end, inshallah, and I want to end with one of the famous sayings of the Arab. Some people have attributed this to some of the early scholars. I haven't actually found a true source for it, but I know that this is something that Arab often quote, and it's attributed to one of the earliest scholars in Islam. And it's a beautiful, beautiful saying. And when I actually heard this, it really resonated with me. And I remember I was at the university, one of my teachers said it in the class, and I immediately wrote it down. And I asked Allah to first and foremost reward my teacher, and all of you, inshallah, for hearing it and sharing it, inshallah ta'ala. So the Arab have a saying where they say, كَلِمَةٌ فِي جَوْفِكَ أَسِيرٌ عِنْدَكَ. That a word that you haven't spoken yet is your prisoner. وَكَلِمَةٌ تَتَكَلَّمُ بِهَا تَجْعَلُكَ أَسِيرًا. But a word once spoken, once said, will make you its prisoner. Right? كَلِمَةٌ فِي جَوْفِكَ أَسِيرٌ عِنْدَكَ. That a word inside of you, meaning a word you haven't spoken, is your prisoner. Meaning you control it. You control when to say it, you control how to say it, you control who to say it to. Right? You control the outcome of it. Right? This is all in your control as long as you haven't spoken it yet. وَكَلِمَةٌ تَتَكَلَّمُ بِهَا. And a word once spoken, once you say it, تَجْعَلُكَ أَسِيرًا. It will make you its prisoner. Meaning now that you've said it, خلاص, now you have to deal with the consequences of this word. Of this thing that you have said, you're now accountable for this. First and foremost, Allah will question you about this word. Right? Once you have spoken it, Allah will question you. Second, the implications it has on other people. Right? You're now accountable for this. And you have to deal with the consequences. Right? And this is why the Prophet said, if you don't have any